we've had a lot of discussions about menopause on our show, but today we're diving deeper on the low libido that tends to go hand in hand with the transition. Our next guest has over 20 years experience in the medical field and is an expert on women's hormonal health. With the nickname Dr. Hot Flash, please welcome Dr. Angela DeRosa to the show.
Thank you. It's so lovely to be here. Thank you for having me. Anytime I have
so grateful you're here.
Yes.
So many questions. We were just talking now.
Yes, and also best nickname in the business, bar none. I love it.
Thank you.
All right, so let's get right to it.
Absolutely it does, but interestingly, it presents very similarly, but women typically start their hormonal changes and their low libido usually in their 30s, and we often we think, okay, it's going to be menopause in their 50s, but it's usually in the 30s, and then men usually start to have it in their 40s. And men typically will develop first the plumbing issues, where women, on the other hand, develop the brain issues, which not to be confused with stupid or crazy, even though they'd like to label us that often. But it's usually a brain hormonal imbalance, and men end up more usually with circulatory issues leading to erectile dysfunction.
So speaking of plumbing, the word testosterone is usually associated with men's health, but you say it's even more important in women's health. Can you explain that?
No, it's very much not talked about, but women actually on a day-to-day basis make more testosterone than estrogens. And we discount it in women, but it actually presents exactly the same when it becomes deficient in women as it does in men. So we get the low libido, the lack of sex drive, although we don't get the circulatory plumbing issues with the erectile dysfunction. It presents with lack of ability to have orgasms, or they're not as intense. So it does, from a sexual standpoint, present very, very similarly. And we often, with men, we will give them the testosterone. We will give them the erectile dysfunction drugs, but since it's not recognized in women, we are often given antidepressants because they think we're crazy. There's a huge gender bias.
Let's talk about antidepressants, Doc. I've been on, and I've been very open since I was 21, so 20 years I've been on Prozac, and it's really saved my entire life. How do antidepressants affect women during and after menopause?
Right. So some women, I want to go up front and say they absolutely, if they have a serotonin or chemical imbalance, the antidepressants work great. But antidepressants and another big category, oral birth control pills, all cause 100% testosterone deficiency. Yikes. So they will end up with all those low libido symptoms of sexual dysfunction. And let's not forget that testosterone also affects our weight, our ability to metabolize and burn sugar, our moods, and various other things, which contribute to the problems even further.
Wow, that's
so
great.
How do women replace testosterone, and what happens if we don't correct it?
Good question.
So if you don't correct it, it is a huge problem in both men and women, because testosterone, outside from all the wonderful sexual things that it does for us, it is also Mother Nature's way of controlling glucose. And if we get a mismanagement of glucose in our body, we become insulin resistant, which then can lead to weight gain, which then leads to the prediabetes, the diabetes, and then the cardiovascular disease. It can also lead to dementias when deficient. It can lead to mood disorders and various other things psychologically, and osteoporosis. So it's not something that we should be laughing at, although it's funny when we talk about erectile dysfunction and all those disorders. It has very serious consequences. And there are wonderful ways to replace them in both men and women. Men have definitely been much more lucky in that regard because the FDA has approved a ton of medications of testosterone for them. But women, we've got zero available FDA products, so we have to have it compounded. And usually it comes in the form of either what we call the gold standard pellet therapy, which looks like Tic Tacs that get inserted under the skin that do a slow release. There's injections. There are what we call fast burst sublinguals that go under the tongue. There are creams. So there's a whole host of ways to replace this. And you just need to find the right physicians who specialize in hormone therapies like myself versus going to your standard primary care, because they may not always understand the full universe available, as well as how to properly interpret labs.
That's a wealth of information. At 42, I want to get ahead of this. Yes. So when do you start? When would I go see someone like you at 42 years old?
Well, usually women start to have what we call perimenopause, which all that means is leading up to and around menopause. And that usually is about 10 to 15 years before we actually hit menopause. So on average, women go into perimenopause in their mid-30s. So if you start to notice changes during that time frame, it's really important to go discuss that with your physicians or hormone specialists. But keep in mind, if you've been on birth control pills or antidepressant or other medications that affect it, that could start well in your teens and 20s. So you need to pay attention. Women know their bodies and they need to ask for the help they need. And again, men have more issues, but unfortunately, we have been given a lot less concern when it comes to that side of it.
Real quickly, Doc, when you mentioned birth control and you just said orally, does that include, like, if you have an IUD, or is it just the oral medication?
It's just the oral birth control, because how that works is it shuts down our ovaries, which then shut down our production of all of our hormones, including testosterone. But the birth control pills actually replace estrogen and progesterone, but it doesn't replace testosterone. The good news with IUD is it only is creating that hostile environment inside the uterus, but it leaves the ovaries function, so a woman actually produces her own hormones. So it's a fabulous option for women for a contraceptive.
Interesting.
Make sure that
Thank you, Doc.
Thank you.
So much to learn. DBL Nation, if you want to learn more about your body as you age, you can get Dr. DeRosa's book. You can also check out her website, drhotflash.com. Honestly, I'm so grateful.
So much information.
We need to talk about this more. Thank you so much. We'll be right back. Thank
My
you.
pleasure.
Thanks,
Thank you.